Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are up and streaming on our Facebook. I know that we've got Abierre joining us here in a moment. She asked me to resend her the link. So
good.
Our conversation today is going to revolve around activism and how that originated and where the movement of what is racism, what is prejudice, what is bias. We're going to set the stage for that today in our campus conversations, and then we'll have a larger discussion about social movements and what it means to be an activist. So we are super stoked that you are here. So before we get started, since you are a fellow alum, can you go ahead and introduce yourself for all of those that are watching that are not familiar with you? Give us a little backstory of how you got to where you are.
Sure. So my name is Ed Wimp. I'm a 2012 alum of Monmouth College from Chicago, Illinois originally. I went to Monmouth because it was far enough away from Chicago that you get the away from home experience, but not so far away that you can't get home for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for those different holidays. So I loved my time there. I played baseball for part of my time there. I was in ZBT. During my time there, I was a business major, political science minor. And I really enjoyed, my education there and the friendships that I made and have cultivated since then. So after Monmouth, I went on to get a master's in business. And I also worked extensively in the entertainment field doing tour management for different musicians. I worked with Earth, Wind & Fire, A$AP Rocky. And I realized that, a legal background would be beneficial regardless of where I want to go in life. So whether I want to do, any sort of business, whether it be entertainment or anything, lawyers are needed for that. And I pursued my legal education. Again, great experience. Went to Florida A&M College of Law, which is an HBCU down here in Florida. The main campus is in Tallahassee, with the law schools in Orlando. And I've just, really enjoyed my practice. I'm able now to help, a lot of people that are discriminated against in their employment, whether it comes down to, the racial discrimination or pregnancy or age or gender, sexual orientation. So I'm really enjoying my career and hope to be able to provide some valuable insight to this talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And I want to make sure that we discuss a little bit what we chatted about on Monday, that as a fellow alum of Monmouth College, that though we love our fantastic institution and it has brought us lots of wisdom, the journey didn't come without struggle. So I want to make sure you tap into that a little bit as you said it very well on Monday on how that kind of set the stage for you moving forward. So because the two of you, I see that she has logged on, because the two of you have not met yet, I want to introduce you to Abierre Minor. She is our student body president currently. Abierre is a senior. Abby, this is Ed Wimp.
Hi, Abby.
Hi, Ed Wimp. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing very wonderful on this day. Very good.
Good.
Okay, so John, where do we want to start? So prejudice, racism, what are those tricky little things, and how do they even get us to a point where we feel compelled to be an activist? Which one of those do you want to tackle first?
Yeah. Truth be told, here's what I was going to do. We have an expert in the room this week, so I actually want to hear from Ed about this, because given his great background and the work that he does, Ed, would you mind kind of walking us through from your perspective in particular, what is racism? What is prejudice from your vantage point?
Yeah, good question. I think, racism, it can be, defined as multitude of things. I think that the most clear-cut description of it is, when there's a gatekeeper do something that you want to do, and that gatekeeper is discriminating on the basis of your race. So, if you're, longing to do something, to go into some sort of career, some sort of employment situation, or anything, or just, being able to express yourself, how you'd like, but the reason that you can't do that is because of your race. That's what racism is to me.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if that was something that was more difficult to define given the work you do in the legal field.
Mm-hmm.
If that's something that's more, my understanding is more precise. And
yeah, but it is, but it's also, at the end of the day, it's also very wishy-washy. And I think that, being an African-American male, there's 1,000,001 times in my life where, something happens and you're wondering, did this happen because of my race, or would this have happened to anybody? And I think that, a lot of racism it's very confusing, because you have to grapple with that. You have to grapple with how you fit into society and how people view you on a very regular basis. So a lot of the cases that I have now that are racial discrimination cases, you've got to really prove that somebody's being treated differently from somebody that might be a white male, for example. And that's difficult to prove because it is very wishy-washy. You're looking at somebody's, subjective intent many times in what they've been doing. And it's hard to get in people's heads and understand why they did what they did. So, and I think that's where the difficulty with racism comes in. It is very difficult. Like, a lot of people are not willing to admit that it exists because they haven't lived it. And, it's not something you can just see and define all the time. So I think that's a lot of the issues that we face still.
Yeah, thank you for tackling that. It's always a tough question, right? Because it is so complex. There are so many different factors that come into it. We talked last week, Regina, we brought up the idea of intersectionality, and that was it was actually started as, I believe, a legal term actually in 1989 from some of the things that from the feminist movement that was going on. Mm-hmm. So I know how difficult it can be, and I wanted to make sure I was giving you the place to talk about just some of the complexities that come with that.
Right. Yeah.
And I appreciate your comment about how, as people of color, there's always that that training in our minds that you pause and you think, okay, what is this because, right? Mm-hmm. Is this because I am this, or is it because I am this, and I think that can be complex, like you said, for people to weed through and say, okay, well, am I being scrutinized because, and I'm just using this loosely, because I didn't do my job, right? Or I'm not doing my job correctly, or am I being scrutinized with a more hyper-focused lens because I didn't do my job and I'm a person of color because people in this environment are able to get away with this, but I apparently am not because I am this. And when we bring that into intersectionality, and you talking about pregnancy and as one of the things that you have worked to combat, as race in regards to your legal practice. I mean, I think that as a woman, did I not get hired because, or is it because I wasn't qualified for the job? And so, those are the things that and it just is so complex when you're a person of color. What lens am I being scrutinized of?
Right. And I think it's, something that's completely unrelatable. And I think, many times people have a good faith effort, to make you feel included as a minority. And they might go out of your way to do that. But also sometimes that can be frustrating as well. And you can't necessarily, it's tough because you can't necessarily blame those people for wanting to do that because they're trying to do the right thing and they are doing the right thing. But sometimes you just kind of wish that it weren't an issue to begin with.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Are you the token, right?
Right.
Yeah, tokenism and that whole idea of having to deal with that, having to deal with imposter syndrome as a person of color. What does that mean when you're there by yourself, right? You feel alone when there's others that don't look like you, don't share your same heritage, ethnicity, that sort of idea. It gets real fuzzy and can get very complex pretty quickly. So
So Ed, talk to us a little bit. So as you're tackling a case, and we'll get into the activism portion of it here after that. But as you're tackling a case and you're weeding through, the cause and effect, and is it what it appears to be, right? Mm-hmm. How do you sort through the levels of prejudice and bias, mm-hmm. and how do you unpack that? Where do you start and where do you end?
Where I start, you want to revert back to, you want to look at the total people in whatever group. So if it's an employment case, you look at all the employees and say, okay, so, who's here? Are there white people here? Are there black people here? Are there Hispanic people here? Are there Asian people here? And you look at, how they're all treated. And what you want to do, to begin with, to prove your case, is show that there's a disparity in treatment from groups of people to groups of people. So if it's a racial discrimination case, you'd be looking at, okay, how are they treating white people? If it's racial discrimination for a black person, right? How are they treating white people? How are they treating this black person? And is there a difference? And then obviously, if there's any other comments that are made, there's some cases that, they're just blatantly called the N-word. Mm-hmm. Or case, I've had cases where they've mocked, what, historically, like, black people have eaten, like ham hocks and greens and stuff. So when you kind of bring in those facts and those comments to prove that there was a racially motivated reason for the disparate treatment. So that's usually the main nucleus of what you want to look for. And then, past that, it just goes, and every case is different. Every case is different. Every case has different facts that you can hinge on. Yeah.
Yeah. How often do you see, especially given, let's just be real, the last year, the last year of chaos and crazy. How often have you seen an increase in people coming to you and having these conversations, or, asking you for legal advice and having the need to put you on retainer?
Yeah, tensions are high, and especially, I'm in Florida, so it's a little bit different down here than it is up north, in the sense that people are more overtly prejudiced, and I've experienced a lot of racism up north in Illinois, but people up there tend to hide it a bit more, whereas down here,
bigots.
It's more in your face. So yeah, tensions are high. There's a lot of disagreements. You can just step outside and, you'll see, disagreements on a daily basis, just in normal life, let alone in a law practice. So, there's definitely been an increase. I think it's on one hand, I think that, we're definitely living through a time when at least there's honesty, and at least if somebody doesn't want you around, they tell you. Mm-hmm. But it's also heartbreaking to think that we've come so far, but then it feels like we're reverting, even though that might not be the case, but it feels like it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When I taught at Galesburg High School, I had the fortune of teaching a class called Diversity Studies. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we talked about in that class was the difference between a timid bigot and an open bigot. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that relative and put it in context to the Great Migration and how, more African Americans started moving down south and all of those things. And I remember having a student say, well, why would you go south? Like, you just, post Civil War, right? And mm-hmm. we wanted that change. We got that change. Why would you go back down there knowing that was right. where everything kind of started, right? And I would always explain to them, there's something, and like you said, there's a double-edged sword between knowing where you stand with someone and having someone be very nice and polite to you and to your face, but then the minute you leave the room, they're like, oh, well, that person is this, that person is that. And I said, you know, so when you think that the color of your skin is an identifiable factor, once you know, sometimes it makes it easier just to live amongst people where you know where you stand. You know, if they're gonna be a jerk, they're gonna be a jerk because, and you know the why. There's no question, there's no ambiguity. It is they have their issues, and you know why they have their issues, and you could, to some extent, you could almost clearly deal with them differently than deal with somebody, you know, that is, I just said this to my daughter the other day. You want to surround yourself by people that are helping you row the boat across the river, not drilling holes in the boat. So when you put that in the context of, you know, race and prejudice and discrimination, I think that, you know, or being a timid bigot, then that plays out, right? Because at least you clearly know where you stand versus having someone that is going to undercut you behind your back.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, Abby.
Yes, ma'am.
Thoughts, questions before we dive into the activism piece?
Okay, for sure. If you don't mind, Mr. Wimp, would you kind of walk me through a little bit of your career journey? What made you land on civil rights cases and things of that nature?
Sure. You know, it's always been important to me, you know, and I suppose, you know, living through, you know, as a Black man in America, you know, growing up in Chicago, and moving down here, you know, I've experienced racism firsthand. And, you know, I think that, you know, wanting to go the legal route just because, you know, laws are applicable to everything across the board, in every industry, every field. And I felt as though, you know, it would be a good avenue to be able to make change, you know, racially, and for a cause that is near and dear to me, and not just for Black people, but for people that just need assistance. You know, I'm a guardian ad litem, also to help children, you know, that might need assistance. So I feel as though, you know, many times, you know, people that need assistance aren't able to find assistance, or they're able to find assistance, but that assistance might be furthering an interest that's not really their interest. So I wanted to be able to provide that to minorities, to women, to people discriminated against for sexual orientation, for people of age discrimination across the board.
Thank you for that.
You spoke a little bit with John and I on Monday about what it was like to be a student of color on Monmouth College campus. You alluded to that a little, and we had a moment of share of that realization that, you know, we love this place. It gave us a solid education, lots of wisdom for life, but that, you know, that doesn't come without baggage when you attend a PWI. You also mentioned how that relates to the fact that, you know, how to navigate systems that were not necessarily created for you, and where that went. So speak to us a little bit about some of the energy that you pulled from here, from our alma mater, to propel you forward.
Sure. You know, I think, you know, going to a school like Monmouth College, you know, for example, you know, it seemed like well, let me start here. So it's difficult for, you know, a lot of African Americans from Chicago, so to speak, to go into an environment like Monmouth. You know, it's rural, for lack of a better word.
Are we around cornfields? Wait, John, are there cornfields here? I didn't know that.
So, you know, there's not a whole lot to do. You know, it's you know, it's just a very, very, very different environment from Chicago. So, you know, in going to Monmouth, you know, it wasn't always, you know, I was treated, you know, many times in a pretty racist manner from other students. At the time, you know, I was young. I was 18 to, you know, 22 years old. So, when you're young, many times you don't realize what's happening until you get out and you get down the road a little bit further, and you're able to look back and be like, wow, like I can't believe somebody said that to me, or I can't believe somebody did that. So, as far as going to Monmouth, I took a lot of that energy, as I got older, and, wanted to just do my part as far as helping maybe other Black students at Monmouth not have some of the same experiences that I had. And just helping, realizing that, I went to Monmouth College and I was able to leave, but some people also live in that environment all the time too, which would make it very difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important. We mentioned this again on Monday. We had Raymond Doswell, who is the curator of the Negro Baseball Museum. We had John and I hosted him at the very beginning, and he even shared, a little bit about experience. And so I think it's always relative. Sometimes I think students forget that people did come before them and did have experiences similar. And when you're navigating lines and systems that were not necessarily constructed for you, from originally, Eddie Moore shared that, we are a historically white institution. We were built for a certain type of people. Now, have we historically been inclusive? Yes. As we moved forward, but that doesn't come. Being a historically white institution doesn't come without its own baggage, because that leads us into that, the system of racism and the system of white supremacy, and why we even have to be an activist. What are reasons that we would want to fight for, right? And so I think that's a good question. What is a social movement? What does activism look like? And how do you do it? And how do you do it well? So.
Yeah, I think as far as activism, I think that it takes a lot of different roles. It's like the game of chess. You've got all these different pieces that work together to meet some common objectives. And for some of those, you need a lawyer, somebody to be able to go to court and litigate. You do need people to go out and have peaceful protests, and be out in the streets. You need, it takes everybody. It takes representation everywhere, in different capacities. So, activism in a nutshell is, it's a very broad term. Everybody can be an activist in their own way and provide assistance in their own way. And I think that it doesn't look like one particular person. An activist doesn't always look like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. An activist could be, the only white principal executive in a huge company, that's having a seat at the table and able to, provide assistance to other people coming along to employ them, or to make sure that the company is constantly thinking about the interests of minorities. So activism looks a lot of different ways.
And probably having, I think in activism, we have to have a broad understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. What is policy? Even from that person at the top to, we always immediately, John and I were talking, and Abby and I have had this conversation, we automatically want to deflect to, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. But there are so many quiet people from behind the scenes that allowed Martin Luther King and Malcolm X to be the people in which that they were. Professor Ott, who is the head of religious studies, you know, he and I had a conversation a few weeks back when we were talking about the comparison. Everyone always wants to think that, you know, Martin was only nonviolent. Well, he was, you know, John and I were joking before, he was public enemy number one, for the love of God. They had him, you know, the FBI, the CIA, everybody knew his every movement. And, you know, to some extent, Malcolm X, because of his style, you know, he was far more open. You knew what was going to happen. He let you know what was going to happen. That made Martin far more dangerous because he did not tell you. Chess was a good analogy, or a poker player. He had that face, wasn't going to let it out of the bag, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's it. Yeah. And
then all of them, again, to throw in there, to continue with the chess metaphor, right? There were a lot of different players. We haven't even talked about SNCC as an organization, which kind of clashed a little bit at times with Martin Luther King, and different times where they had started out different, you know, doing different things with the bus boycotts, and then, you know, felt a little bit like MLK swooped in a little bit to do some things. But again, multiple different people doing multiple different things. I like the analogy you used, Ed, because there's so many different goals for different folks, but they were all headed in the same direction. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw you under the bus, no pun intended, with the bus boycott. Explain SNCC. You know, we have this rule about acronyms, and because our current K-12 system is not doing a fantastic job of mapping out some of those things. What is SNCC, John Salazar?
Sure. SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And it was I like to bring it up all the time when I'm talking to students, because it was a student-led organization. These were students that decided on their own that they were going to take time away from their studies from college, and they were going to figure out a way to make their voices known in the civil rights movement. They did the different bus boycotts. They bussed people that came in to do other, you know, boycotts. And these are young folks. These are college age folks doing this work. And it was a major part of the civil rights movement. And I always like to bring it up again, because these are students doing this work. And it was a lot. They were very powerful in what they were able to do.
And that wasn't not met without pushback, because my husband actually just made the comment to my son the other day. He was asking, they watched Selma in their history class. And so CJ wanted to know what other movies they could watch, or that he could watch, that were related to, you know, historical context. And so we brought up Mississippi Burning. And so when you think about, you know, the 3 civil rights workers, you know, one of them was still in school, that went down and were, you know, they disappeared. I think obviously the North and the South knew what happened to them, but think about the process that it went through. And, you know, they went down there to help register people to vote. And that's what they were met with. You know, that was the fate that ended them, just to help people register to vote. So,
and when we say they were met with, you know, pushback, I mean, we're talking beatings, being killed in certain instances. They were doing all that before some other people got involved. So there's a lot to say. Selma's a great movie, by the way.
I mean, and that was so, you know, so recently too. You know, I think that's, you know, what a lot of people fail to realize, is that was not a long time ago. You know, and a lot of the people that, you know, you go to the grocery store, a lot of the people that are older that, you know, are in line next to you at the grocery store may have been part of those beatings, may have been beating people. You know, it's like those people are still alive. You know, and so we're not far removed from that.
That's so critical.
And that's great, and also extremely sad. When you think about, it wasn't that long ago, but we're coming up on 50 years, you know, and what's changed, right? We're talking about, I was just listening into the news today, NPR, because I'm that age and I'm old. But I was listening to NPR.
You are old, John.
About, I'm getting there, you know. But that Minneapolis police officer, Chauvin, the one with the, yeah, I mean, that's still happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I actually wanted to speak a little to that. So I think that as of right now, we are in this age where there is a call to action. There's a call for mobilization. You know, we have these social movements going on, and students, you know, older people, everyone is kind of getting involved and trying to do what they determine as their part. But I think one of the things that we kind of miss in this is that a lot of social movements, especially back in the day, were heavily organized, right? They had programs, they had, you know, meetings, they, you know, really went through being disciplined and how do you, you know, stand your ground when you're in a mob, and how do you continue to be nonviolent when you're in a mob, and things of that nature. So could you speak to kind of like, what are the dangers of, or maybe not the dangers is not the correct word, but what are the dangers of activism in today's age? What are things to consider when you're determining or calling yourself an activist?
Sure. I think, you know, it's important to determine what role you plan on playing, you know, and understand the repercussions, you know, because I mean, if you get carried away and, you know, go ahead and catch a felony, you know, it's going to follow you the rest of your life. You know, so if your goal is to, you know, have a, you know, great job and, you know, to be able to travel when you want and to be able to vote and continue to vote, you know, you got to realize, you know, perhaps throwing a brick through a window is not for you. Leave that to somebody else. You know, that's not your way of expression. And I think, you know, as far as all that's concerned, you know, being able to understand, you know, people, you know, also people die in the name of activism. You know, you think about all the great leaders before. We were talking about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. They're no longer here. So you have to realize too, you know, when you put yourself out there, you become a target. You know, that could be in the picture. We're in a big age of cancel culture. You know, that could be in the picture for you. So when you put yourself out there and have opposition against, you know, powerful forces and people, you have to understand that that could come with a price, and that, you know, you can't always hide behind the First Amendment of free speech. You know, sure, it might be legal for you to be able to talk and to have a, you know, pedestal to stand on and spread your opinion and your word, but also that could come with repercussions as well. So, and I'm not saying that to deter people. I'm not, you know, I'm just saying that's what you're signing up for, and that's the road that you're going down.
So I got a question as a follow-up to that. I had a question that came in on Facebook. What are your opinions regarding creating a group built to speak and focus on activism on campus and the hardships that particularly people of color face on campus? There's some concern about that.
Sure. I mean, I think that's a good idea. I think creating awareness is always a positive thing. And, you know, I feel a bit remiss in my time at Monmouth, you know, I'm sure a lot of people that I know would have no idea that I've experienced very overt racism at Monmouth. You know, not stuff where, you know, not stuff that could be interpreted not as racist. Like I'm saying, like, I'm not going to say like what, but very outwardly racist things. And I think that a lot of people, you know, like a lot of people I went to school with don't know that because I never talked about it, never expressed that. And, you know, I think that that's a great idea. You know, I think people should know, you know, people should understand the stories, and people should understand how some of their actions make other people feel. You know, yeah. So I'll leave it there. You know, people should realize that, you know, it is still an issue, and to approach it accordingly, that it is an issue.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
With that, especially knowing that students want that outlet and need that outlet, the role of administration, right? I shared with you that I am currently co-chairing the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group. So we have this working group that is diligently doing things behind the scenes, and people always want that call to action. They want transparency, they want to know what's going on, they should. We want to give that to them. But what is, in that tandem, having been a student here on campus, what is that tandem, and Abby being student body president, between trusting the administration and being a student, and having, as when you're talking about this component of activism and really having to know all of the moving pieces of it, where is that relationship? And can there be one? Can you make change as a student without giving a certain amount of trust and faith into the administration? Because I know that is, having been a student who has questioned that, I will openly say that I questioned that as a student, and now being in that role, so how do we do that? How do students trust the administration?
Sure. But I think it starts with more representation in the administration as an active. And I've been removed from. I haven't been, a student in almost 10 years. And really getting up there. That's kind of
10,
yeah.
Ed.
Yeah,
I'll be 20 in May. 10. Oh my God, I want to go back.
So I'm not super familiar with how the administration is now. But I think having that representation in the administration that you can tell actively, like, truly really cares, and wants to see minority students thrive, and not just give them the opportunity to come to the school, and then if they don't make it, all right, good, farewell.
Mm-hmm.
But people that see these students come in and are vested in seeing them follow through to the end. So I think that's one thing that would aid in that. At the same time, it also very much is in the students' hands. And I think that, we need to start having the conversation in general, not just in Monmouth College, but in general, we need to start having conversations and challenging each other and challenging each other's thoughts and beliefs, and doing things, with or without administration.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And,
No,
go ahead.
No, I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, I was basically just wrapped up, but and I think it's certainly within students' power to get together at somebody's dorm. Well, maybe not during COVID, social distance. Maybe meet in a terrace somewhere or something, but get together and just talk about what's going on in the world, and just exchange those ideas. And see what you come up with, and see what kind of events. I mean, I think the event that I'm not sure who the student is that was talking about the, sharing experiences.
The men's initiative that we're working behind the scenes on. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, just stuff like that, and just stuff to get the conversation going and get people on the same page, but also on different pages in the sense that we're having discussion that challenges each other to really, progress.
And thank you for bringing that up. One of my big things on that is, to the other point that Regina was talking about, is the idea of and what can students do when they don't have that trust, right? Mm-hmm. What can we do? What can they do that's not going to get them in trouble, but make a statement and help them do that right? Mm-hmm. And I wonder if sometimes that's more the issue. How can students get in what that congressman once said is good trouble?
Yeah,
right? Get in good trouble. And that's
John Lewis.
Yeah, John Lewis. How can we do that? And I always push students to do that, because when you were talking about, like, Ed, about ways that students can still get together, and they can safely, of course, during COVID, but find ways to figure out to come together and organize. And it's like, I hear this every few years or so. Students are like, we're going to get a new organization. We're going to start a new thing.
Yep.
And no one just takes a second to look and think, what current things in the current structure are there? And there's multiple ways. Abby, I know, is shaking her head because I look at her and I'm like, student body president. I know she is begging people to say like, hey, come to Scott's Student Senate, bring up these issues. Let's discuss. I appreciate that. There are other organizations now on campus dedicated to those issues. And so I just want to like push students to be like, look around, ask a couple questions, get involved. Because I have the issue when we talk about, you mentioned cancel culture, when students will come in and it's that lawnmower thing. They haven't been involved all year long, and then they have one moment and they just come in mowing down everybody, and then they're done. No follow-up, no nothing. Yeah. And that annoys me, right? Because I look back and I look at SNCC. Again, I love them. They were dedicated. Yeah. They showed that dedication. They gave up their time. They gave up their energy. That's how they made a change. Yeah. And,
yeah. Well, go ahead, Abby.
No, I'm sorry. I might take this to another space, but if I can speak on the student perspective and somebody who has been involved and, brought some things to campus, I think it's important. And in this idea of trust, I think it's important to recognize that there's a network, that you don't always have to go to the same person for everything. I think it's important to recognize that there are allies on this campus who have power in different ways and different capacities, and not everything and not every piece of activism means organizing a march or means lawn mowing down administrators or means coming together as a collective and, doing this very interactive protest. Some things can be solved through a conversation. Some things can be solved through a petition. So it's recognizing that you want to be clear about what your goals are, and then clear about who are you talking to or communicating to who has the power to get those goals accomplished, And sometimes, for example, within our institution or within Scott Student Senate, we know that if we want to talk about something with Res Life, or we want to talk about something on the more policy side, we'll probably go to Dean Salazar, because he has a lot of influence. He does those things and he controls that kind of aspect of campus. And so it's just important to recognize, like, what do you want? What goals do you want to accomplish? And then who are you going to accomplish those goals? MLK and art, like a lot of people who are important activists in the past, they rely heavily on negotiation. They negotiated first. And then if you didn't give them what they needed, then they, followed up with the protest. So I think it's important to lead with that. I think, unfortunately, we come to a day and age where a lot of people feel like they're not being heard. But on the same side of the coin, I don't know if a lot of people are doing enough to empower their own voices or operate in the systems that are created to empower their voices. So you can't really bang down the door if nobody was expecting you to knock. It's important to kind of set up that first. And then do your follow-up. And again, follow-up is so important. If it's something that is important to you and you really want to see change, you have to be invested in that change. And that doesn't just have one event, I say what I have to say, and then everything's going to work. And I think, unfortunately, that's a lot of how people think of what activism is and what it looks like. But there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to actually make change happen. And while it's still important to, protest and mobilize and do all the things that you need to do to feel accomplished, I think it's equally important to establish yourself, create goals, negotiate, have conversations, establish relationships so that you can, on the flip side, make sure that what you want is actually being accomplished in the ways that would be the most efficient to the time that you're investing in the change that you want to happen.
Yeah.
No, Abby, I think that's absolutely. And I think, I think this summer taught us that, right? Because civil unrest in the midst of a pandemic taught us that we had to focus on some areas that probably we didn't focus as well on 50 years ago, that mental health component to it. And, and how does it impact your job, your life moving forward? I mean, who would have ever thought we would have had the civil unrest that we did this past year in the midst of a pandemic, and then have to come out of it and be like, oh, I feel great. I can get up every day and go to work and everything, and put on the bells and whistles and the roses and sunshine, and everything is great. I mean, we've had to refocus and re-energize in different ways than what we've experienced in past efforts. And that, I think, has probably caused people to be more strategic and really have to have a very organized action plan of what's next.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, we are coming up on 45 minutes. And so I knew that it was going to go fast having Ed with us today, and Abby as well. So let's just kind of summarize, Ed, share with us as we reflect on what does it mean to be part of a movement and to be an activist. Are you willing to share some parting Scott wisdom with us?
Absolutely. I think the first step is doing a SWOT analysis with yourself, and look at your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for yourself in your own personal life. What are you good at? How could you help as an activist? What are you not good at? What should you maybe stay away from or get better at in order to be a better activist? What are your opportunities? What situations are you in now where you could make a change, or what can you get into where you can make a change? And lastly, what are the threats? What do you have on the line? What do you have to lose? What can be an external force that could be a threat to you? So I think once you analyze yourself in that fashion, you're able to really figure out which chess piece you want to be, so to speak, and which chess piece would best fit you, and which role you're going to play in any movement going forward. So I think that's my biggest parting word, is just analyze yourself and see how you can fit into the movement, and figure out what's important to you.
I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Abby, John?
Yeah, Abby, please.
And I would add, after you do that analysis, I would look at what already exists, who is already doing the work that you want to do, and what is your relationship with them? Who is the person of contact to get involved with that? And then I would sit down and try to merge those initiatives. I think another thing that is very important is to recognize really clearly when you write out those goals, like, what do you want to accomplish? What does activism look like? And what are you willing to invest in this cause? How much time do you have to commit to the cause? What is your capacity? What is your workload? And being very clear and communicating what that goal looks like to those existing organizations, or if you need to create one, making sure that in the creation of that, that you are also having that conversation, because, sometimes activism for a certain goal, that might take a year or two. If you're a senior, sorry, better luck next time, right? So recognizing, okay, who do I need to give it back to? Who do I need to have under me so that they can continue working on this cause? And making sure that you're just being realistic with what you're trying to implement. I think it's important to recognize that activism in certain goals is a continuum. It doesn't end and it doesn't start with you. You didn't create the wheel, but you are a part of the car, right? Mm-hmm. So just recognizing that, again, that this is going to be a process, and making sure that you have that time and that passion to commit to that process.
Yes.
Absolutely. John?
Oh, no, I think Ed and Abby covered it all. Honestly, the only other thing I guess I might add is also understand, for those of you who enter into these spaces with privilege, know when to help and when to take a back seat. I think sometimes that can be a tough pill for some folks to swallow when you know that there's something going on, you want to help, that doesn't mean you have to be the spokesperson, right? Sometimes you can just be a part of that and let your presence be known. Sometimes that's all you can do better by simply letting others, lending your voice to theirs. And so particularly just recognizing the spaces you're in. That's about the only other thing I'd add, because that's just as important, to be supportive of others in all of our approaches that we take.
Yeah.
Activists and allies come in tandem with each other. And so absolutely. I love this. This is, I'm not going to lie. It's on a gloomy St. Patrick's Day in the middle of cornfields. This has been a good 45, 50 minutes. Yeah. So I'm glad that we got to share this space with Ed and Abby. For those of you that have tuned in to us for the last about 50 minutes, thank you. We are privileged to be able to have asked Ed back and be with us in this space. We hope to see his face and engaged more around campus in these upcoming years. I already told him he's going to be hearing from me again soon. So, and you are, if I'm correct, Jennifer Armstrong, right? Where you are doing a tartan talk in May.
Yeah, I believe it's May 19th, I think. I could be wrong on the exact date, but it's in May.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful. So we will make sure that'll be just after graduation. So we will make sure we share that all over our social medias through the office as well. Abby at that point will officially she will have crossed the bridge to the alum status. Oh my goodness. And hopefully doing just as powerful things on the other side as Ed is now. So thank you. We look forward to the next time. So I am going, John.
Before we end, I do want to remind all of our viewers, if you have any questions or comments, if you have something you want us to discuss from this, please put it into the chat. Please talk about it in our comment section. We'd be glad to get back with you, whatever your question is. Love to engage that way, both during this time as well as online. So let us know.
Have a happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone, and have a good rest of your week. Bye.